Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Machine Learning. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Burke, and I do data engineering and machine learning at Databricks. I'm joined by my amazing, wonderful, and beautiful co-host,
Ben Wilson. I draft design docs for sandbox safe execution of GenAI generated code in Python at Databricks.
Okay, I think I followed that. Cool. Anyway, today we're talking with Brian. He started his career as a web developer, and over the next 6 years, he founded 4 companies. He then joined Uber and quickly became a lead software engineer for the safety team. And then after Uber, he founded his 50th or something company called Doppler, where he currently works as CEO. So kicking it off, seems like you've been in entrepreneurship for a while and potentially enjoy it. So why entrepreneurship and why so much of it?
Good question. I don't know. I think for me, it's been much of an instinct calling. Like I've always known that I wanted to do something, regardless of the word entrepreneurship. I love the idea of like, you have an idea in your head of what you want to exist in the world. And then it's your job to go make it happen. And like that process, I really love. And entrepreneurship is very much like, it's a very, very hard game because the game keeps changing, right? Like a good example, you build the product and the product starts working. All of a sudden now you need to start building out the team. Okay, the team starts working. Now you need to build more layers of the team. You need to build more products to keep growing at the rate needed to keep raising capital and keep moving up in the markets. And to stay competitive with your competitors that all of a sudden start coming out of the woodwork. And so it becomes this like, it's a very lively game. Like the game keeps changing in the dimensionality of it. And I just love all parts of that. It feels like a 3-dimensional chess match. And a lot of the rules haven't even been defined in the game. So you're learning the rules while playing it. Great example of that is like you build a product that you think people will love, and all of a sudden realizes that the market actually doesn't want it that much. But if you change one thing of your product, all of a sudden it's loved, right? And there was nothing on paper that said that was going to happen, or no blog post you could have read. It was like it's a lot of trial and error, and I just love that entire process.
For you, where do you think that started? Was it like early childhood stuff?
Yeah.
Was that your core personality, or is it something you learned as a professional?
I got very lucky. My dad was an engineer, and we did a lot of engineering stuff when I was a kid. Like I played chess every single night, and then on the weekends we just built random shit in the garage. And eventually I started competing in science fairs, and won all the way up to the state level science fair twice. And so we got very, very competitive at science fair, and the art of, and the way we did science fair was not like, let's put some Mentos in a Coke bottle and see what happens. It was more like we built devices that could fly with no wings or engines using ionic propulsion. We tried to build a Pong game controlled by your mind. Like we were trying to push the limits as much as we could for like being middle school and high school kids, and with very low budgets as a middle class family. But I just love that. I was like, that was so cool. And there was a moment for me where I think really kicked off the entrepreneurship journey was a little bit before that, where I was walking to school with one of my classmates in elementary school. And we had these like old school Motorola Razors, if you know what I'm talking about, back in the day. And this was before anyone could like watch movies on their phone. It was like that thing was used for like calling and texting, and that's about it. Maybe like some parental controls on top. And he goes and he's like, why can't I watch a movie on my phone? It's stupid that this is impossible. And it got my mind like racing. And what I realized was that you could record on the phone, right? Like there was a camera there and you could record and then you could do playback. And it's like, well, the phone really doesn't care if it's playing back something from the camera or from something I tell it to record. And so what I ended up doing was ripping a DVD that night, figuring and then recording a video from my phone, seeing what the format was, and then changing the video to that format, and then uploading it on a micro SD card and putting it in the phone. And I was able to watch a full-blown movie the next day and showed it to my friend. And at that moment, I was like, okay, you can basically build anything you want at this point. It's just, what do you want to build? And that's what really got my mind racing of like, okay, there's so much opportunity out here. You just got to find the opportunity, see it, and then ruthlessly go after it and execute.
Cool. So Doppler actually I have 7 questions. I'll start with this one. Doppler provides centralized secret management via cloud. Why this application? Was it born out of a real pain point, or is this your true passion?
Both. So I was at the time I was kind of doing another startup. It was Doppler started out as a crypto machine learning marketplace, kind of all the buzzwords in one. And I guess this is pretty relevant for this audience. And over time, I realized that it was before the AI ML hype, and it very much felt like pushing a boulder up a hill. Like you move 1 foot forward, slip 5 feet back from exhaustion. It was just really freaking hard. And at some point, I just got to my breaking point, like 8 months in, trying to get this thing to work. Turns out it did work, right? Like there's what's it called? There's an AI model marketplace today that's great. I'm
Hugging
forgetting
Face?
the Hugging Face. Yes, we were so similar to Hugging Face. I mean, like even to the design, it was so similar. But we were just way too freaking early. Like again, going back to the 3-dimensional game, like we were just too early and they didn't work. But yeah, we were working on that, and it had crypto in it, and then at some point we actually ripped out the crypto, and it was literally just like Hugging Face. And we were at a breaking point, and we decided to take a trip to Cancun and kind of just take a break from it all. And the first day there, I realized that I was never going to make this project work. I just was not destined for it, which is funny because if I stayed in the game like 2 years longer, I was actually going to probably make it work. It was just a timing problem, but I didn't know that at the time. It's kind of hard to predict the future. And so I started looking at all the problems I was facing, and managing environment variables and secrets is just one of them. They kept popping up in all these weird, interesting ways. And so I come back from Mexico and I go to this dinner that Stripe was hosting. I had a bunch of founders at it and developers called the Stripe Atlas Dinners. And there I basically asked the room, hey, am I a shitty engineer? Is the world broken? Like, you tell me. I can't tell if this is a real problem or not. And they were all struggling too. And so that made me realize that like this is a real thing. And the answer to the problem is not to go build another security tool. It's to build another tool that developers genuinely love using that also has benefits, security benefits. Kind of like this theme of like make vegetables taste like candy. Vegetables being the security, candy being the developer productivity. You want it to taste like candy so that everyone uses it. And that I felt like uniquely qualified for and got me really excited. I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm seeing the matrix here. And all of our competitors are building this like ugly, hard to use security product that like everyone hates using. And I see the magical bullet over here, or the magical candy that's going to make people love to use this tool. And that just like excited the hell out of me. And we built the first version in 3 weeks, got our first set of customers on the 4th week with what I call Chipotle sales, where I would basically take any friend or anyone who knew of my friends that were developers, and I'd say, I'm going to take you to Chipotle. I'll get you anything you want on the menu, and I'm going to rant at you for 2 hours until you basically say yes, you're going to use a product. And it was, I would never recommend it again. It's a terrible strategy, but it worked. It was just really expensive and really hard. A lot of failures on that one, but we got our first set of customers from that, and that's what got us going.
How do you make it taste like candy?
Great question. In short, it comes back to productivity. Developers are extremely sensitive to productivity. If you like block their flows, they will like actively avoid using your tool. And so the trick is to actually deeply integrate it into their workflows. So an example would be, we have a VS Code extension where you can edit your secrets side by side with your code. So you don't need to go to another tool to edit your secrets. It's almost like editing an env file, but now it's secure. And the second you click that save button, it will sync it to your entire team. And then all your other team members will now get their applications automatically restarted, kind of like a Dropbox level sync with those new secrets. And so there's no need to go ping your coworkers and be like, hey, did you add this secret? My code is now relying on it, and I can't run locally until I get that new secret. Those days are behind you, because if someone on your team adds it, you automatically get that update. And it's all happening in the tools that you love.
How many integrations do you need to build?
Ooh, it was a lot. I mean, I think we're at like 40 now or something like that. Like deep integration. So I wouldn't say it's like in the thousands. It's like 40, and then you need to support every language. Like actually one critical learning for us, going back to like this is a journey, is we've built the first CLI in JavaScript. And we were like, okay, we need a CLI that can work on any language. But we made JavaScript dependency. So really what you needed was, it could support any language, but you also needed JavaScript. And so we were like, okay, we got to rewrite this in Go and make it a binary so it doesn't have that dependency. And then that was like a big unlock for us. We were able to like get a lot more customers through it. I think the CLI supporting every language has like really helped. Then we had to build some frameworks supports. We had to build some SDK supports, and then a bunch of like native integrations. And the one that I find the most interesting is like our Kubernetes sync, which is really cool. It like it'll sync to Kubernetes secrets and then automatically redeploy their deployments with whatever rollout strategy you have. So you get this like nice, really clean model of like secrets stored in Kubernetes secrets. So if Doppler was ever down for any weird reason, you still have like secrets to use, those secrets in a secure place, and your applications automatically get those secrets whenever they change.
Yeah, I have some questions about this. When you're talking about a service like this that directly competes with native stuff that exists within cloud providers, how challenging is it when you have a customer that's like, I just want this working in like Azure, like directly in Azure? How does that conversation go when you're talking to a tech giant and you're like, hey, I've got 37 customers that say they want this integration. Do you want to play ball? How does that go?
Yeah, I think the first thing we do is we try to flip them into thinking the Doppler way. And the Doppler way is that AWS Secrets Manager, Azure Key Vault, or GCP Secrets Manager are not competitors to us. They are actually partners. We actually have formal relationships with all of them. And our view is kind of more like GitHub, right? Like GitHub, you pull your code locally, you change that code, then you push it back up to GitHub. And then when you're ready, you push that code up to AWS, and AWS will store that code and deploy it to your application. Same exact model, right? Pull your secrets down, change them to what you need, push them back up, push them into AWS. AWS roll it out to your applications. So AWS Secrets Manager, Azure Key Vault, GCP Secrets Manager, and all the others are just partners for us. We have direct integrations with all of them and our job is to keep them in sync. So that's where that orchestration layer is one of the core value props we provide. So I would say 90% of the customers that come to us already are using one of the cloud providers. And it's perfect because now the installation is so much simpler. Instead of saying, hey, rip out all the old ways of fetching secrets and put it this new way, we just say, hey, take AWS Secrets Manager, connect Doppler on top, and now anytime it changes in Doppler, it's going to change in AWS Secrets Manager. And there's no more installation than that. It's literally like 2 clicks and you're done. You have production infrastructure set up.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it like a better business proposal actually, and a better explanation of like how you made something into candy. Because as somebody who's had to do those integrations, where you're like, okay, I need to connect to every single cloud provider for doing something. I was working on a prototype like a month ago or so for this similar situation, where it's like, okay, how do I do this in Bodo and assume IAM role authentication for the user and then make this request? Well, what about these edge cases? And how do they actually get this to sync to prod when it's deployed?
Yeah.
And make sure that their IAM role is propagated there. It quickly becomes, it's turtles all the way down. Complexity becomes really, really bad. So you can push that onto the user, but that's putting a plate of vegetables in front of somebody who wants to eat a hamburger. And they're like, dude, I don't want to deal with this. Like,
they want
build that API for me.
It's kind of crazy. So we started off with like, we're going to make this like 2 to 3 button clicks and that's it. Like there's like a hard line in Doppler of like, this integration has to be 3 clicks, fire and forget. You set it up once, you're done. And then what we got feedback was like, that actually wasn't enough. Because when you start rolling out to like, we have some very, very large organizations that use this, like organizations that are on the roadmap to deploying up to like 125,000 engineers on Doppler, like very large organizations. And they go, well, we don't want to do that 3 clicks for every single team. That's a lot of teams. And half these teams don't even speak English. And so this is where we started adding Terraform support. So they can basically add it to their Terraform specs and the integrations will automatically get standed up along with all their projects, environments, configs, the whole Doppler model along with it. And so that has actually become like an even more powerful thing of like, they need to do 1 click, right? They copy and paste a couple template code into their Terraform spec files. They click go, and all of a sudden that they are now working in Doppler with all the orchestration.
Question for both of you on that front. I've seen this with MLflow a lot, where it's sometimes challenging to work with new customers, but it's also challenging to work with the biggest customers. And finding value props for sort of novices and the like super experts, they typically have a very fundamental user journey. So how do you guys think about catering to all users? Do you have a specific user you focus on and then support the others as you can? How do you think about it?
It's a good question.
I can take a stab at the ML flow side.
Go for it.
Or just like open source ML stuff. Depends on where your product is in its journey. And at the early stage of it, you're trying to roll something out. You focus on making it as simple as possible and intentionally make feature decisions where you know, like, oh, this isn't going to appeal to this group, but the development effort in order to get that to be out there is so significant that it makes more sense to focus on the basic use cases first in order to just gain that intuitive knowledge that people will develop, that, hey, this is an easy tool. And if you get that into their head of like, this solves my problem and it's really cool and the demo works great and everything's functional for the novice, then later on you respond to what requests come in from the big enterprise customers. They're like, hey, we need this layer of security here. You're like, okay, we'll build that. But we don't do stuff like focus on that hard problem at first, because it runs a huge risk of you build something and then nobody uses it, nobody asked for it, and then the worst case scenario is somebody asking, why did you build this? Or,
Yeah,
we need something completely different. Like, this doesn't work for us. You're like,
So
okay,
in summary,
here's
it's
3 months of
request.
dev work.
It's request-driven development. That's the one-liner, basically, irrespective of the user.
Pretty much.
Cool.
I
don't
I'd
know
say
how Brian does it.
for us, it's been a journey, and like the way we kind of think about it is like going back to actually our pricing plans. We have the developer plan, the team plan, and the enterprise plan. And another way of like saying that is like we have a plan for developers, we have a plan for teams, and we have a plan for team of teams, right? And we have started building those up, starting with the developer. So before we even had the team plan, we had the developer plan that was free, and Doppler started free. And we built out, and we built a really great offering for that. And once that was solid, we started building the team plan out and the feature set in that team plan. And now we're kind of like in that journey of building the enterprise side. That has been the journey. Now, when we get feature requests all the time from developers, we get it from enterprises. I think what we look for is we look for that common thread of value among all of the customers. And we try to like ignore the direct ask, and we look for the underlying problems that they're talking about and seeing how widespread that problem is. And we try to bucket it. Is this like an enterprise only problem? Is this a problem that every developer will face regardless if you're on an enterprise or not? Because like, even though our champions, which is like the DevOps team in our case, are very, very technical people, when they roll it out to all of the engineers at the company, not all of them are that technical. There may be a bunch of junior engineers that operate very similarly, or mid-level engineers that operate very similar to like a startup engineer or like a startup intern, right? And so there's a lot of parallels there. And so that's why you kind of go back to like, what are the problems and how widespread are those problems across our user base? And we try to focus on the deepest problems that have the highest level, highest coverage, or the deepest problems that will like it's either going to be breadth or depth, basically. You know what I mean? So like if you're on the breadth side, it's going to focus on the entire user base, but it's not that deep, but it's like deep enough where like it's a real pain. Or on the enterprise side, it's so deep that they're willing to pay for this. Like they're willing to like we've had, I'll give you an example that's like really powerful for like our enterprise, is that we literally built for enterprise. And I would say in a year from now, if we fast forward, that will eventually be on like the lower tier plans. Like we like to take features and move them down the tiers as we add more features to the enterprise side. But it's been pull requests or change requests. And the idea is like there's 2 primary use cases. One is an enterprise wants to require that there's 2 sets of eyes anytime secrets change, especially in production, just like how you have the same thing for code. So that was like a really heavily demanded feature. The other one is they want to lock down production and staging access. So only the DevOps team has access to it, but the developers still have the ability to get those kind of secrets into production. And so they can create a change request to production, even though they can't see the production secrets. And then someone on the DevOps and security team will basically be able to review and approve it. so they can kind of like chuck it over the wall to the DevOps and security team. Both require two sets of eyes, just it's one has like an access control model difference. And that was something that was like every enterprise was like, we want this now. Like, we will churn if you don't provide this to us, kind of like level of desire. And so that we listen very deeply on. And we think it actually has so much value that it can definitely go down in the team plan. It's just a matter of time. I think what we're going to end up doing is like, we're going to build more policies around it. Like, kind of like a GitHub has like a policy where like, if this is a production environment, it has to go through a pull request. There's no other path. Like, building those kind of like policies into it is like something we'll do. And then we'll make the base feature set of like, you can have a approval flow on secrets go down to the team plan. But that's kind of our model, is like either go super deep on like an enterprise feature that eventually can like ripple slowly down into like the lower tiers, or go something that's like very like breadth wise. A good breadth example would be config inheritance for us, which is like, imagine you have a config, which is like a list of secrets in the Doppler world. We now built it like Legos, so you can stack them on top of each other. So you can build a config that is only has secrets in it that are shared across other projects. So like maybe you have one database that's used across the entire company. And that database, that logging, that ports, all that stuff is going to be the same across every team, every feature. So you can put all those credentials in there, and then you can have every other feature team's projects consume, like stack on top that config, so that the DevOps team can control that. The DevOps team says, this is what the database URL is. And for production and for local development, everyone gets that update. They click the second they click the save button, because it ripples out. Like, that was like a feature we launched for everyone, but it was like heavily demanded.
Got it. Crystal clear. So shifting gears a little bit, I was wondering what your experience was like with the Forbes 30 under 30, which you were nominated for in 2021.
Weird experience. Woke up one day to a flood of calls and emails from friends saying you got Forbes 30 under 30. And I was like, okay. Didn't know I was even in the running. And that was like, it was just like so random. And I found out like many months later, it was like someone in YC recommended me, in Y Combinator. But yeah, I didn't apply for it at all. Didn't really have actually, I take it back. Someone reached out to me a couple months before Forbes 30 and 30. And they said, hey, there's like some Forbes thing that you may be nominated for. Fill out this like application. And that's all I knew. And like, I was like, I don't know. I don't care, but I'll do it anyways. And I kind of like just wrote some stuff in there and moved on really quickly. And then many, many months later, I wake up to these like calls and texts saying you got Forbes 30 under 30. But I had no clue that it was like one was for that. I thought like, we do a lot of work with Forbes. There's like a ton of like articles they've done for Doppler. So I thought this was just going to be another one of those like articles or bios or something. It didn't really click in my mind that this was like a 30 under 30 thing. But honestly, I try to tune out for most of that. Like, it's kind of like, it's like a buzzy thing that people really care about. But like I want to say almost in the real world, it doesn't matter. Like, what matters is like, is your company successful, right? Like, I don't care if I get Forbes 30 under 30. I want Doppler to be successful. I want our customers to have real impact. If I fail on both those things, it does not matter if I got Forbes 30 and 30. If anything, it's worse, because now I'm like, shit, I got this amazing medal and it don't mean crap.
Got it. So you're not cooler than everyone now.
No, I mean, I like, for me, it's like, you look at it and you're like at least for me, there's like a bunch of companies in my YC batch, which is like a group of like 200, 400 startups, something like that. It's some big number. I forget how many it was. And it's like, you look at that and you see in that batch, some companies died, some companies are zombies, some companies are thriving. And then there's a couple giants. And like, I look at the giants and I'm like, man, I wish I could be you guys right now. I know like the scale of success because I know what you guys are doing and we're not doing that. Like, and it's very hard for me to go, oh yeah, I'm a Forbes 30 under 30 crushing it kind of guy, when I'm looking at the guys that I was just having like cookies and coffee with, or cookies and hot chocolate in my case, because I don't drink coffee, during that batch. And now they're like 10,000 miles above us in success and impact. And I'm like, it's kind of hard. It's quite humbling to be like, oh yeah, those two guys, we used to just chill with them, and now they're like multi-billionaires. And their companies are worth like billions and billions of dollars and have so much impact. And there's like billboards everywhere you go with their name on it. It's like, it's very hard to be like, oh yeah, that Forbes 30 and 30 thing, I'm crushing it.
What are some companies you look up to?
GitHub, big one. I mean, just like, and also like, I know this is going to be like almost cliche to say, but like Microsoft, like the scale that Microsoft has gotten to with how much funding they've raised. Doppler has raised more funding than Microsoft has, and they're enormous. They're like a $1 trillion cap company. Like that's crazy. Like that's like genuinely crazy. Couple companies that I like really, really admire in today's like for today's generation of companies. Perplexity. It's actually an AI ML company. They're basically just like how you have Google for search. They've kind of taken it a step further and they give you the knowledge behind that search. So you can ask a question, get an answer. Kind of like what ChatGPT was supposed to be, but like these guys, I feel like are like that promise delivered. I really love Perplexity. Like it's my default search engine. Anytime I have a question, I just go to them. Highly recommend even paying for their pro plan. It's so worth it. But Perplexity is probably my favorite company today right now. There's also another company called Light Matter, which is rebuilding chips using photons. So instead of like electrons running through, it's photons. And that's going to lead to significant compute performance and then increases, and then also a lot less energy consumption, which is going to be really big because like you can imagine like every time you see like ChatGPT 3, ChatGPT 4, like for us as a consumer, we see just a small little number change, 3 to 4 to 5. But behind the scenes, that's like billions of dollars of GPUs, right? And those billions of dollars of GPUs require billions of dollars of energy, right? And so it's like enormous amounts of energy. They were like estimating that by like ChatGPT 6 or 5, it's going to require 10% of the entire US power grid. Just think about that for a second. Like Amazon just got in the business of building nuclear reactors. That's how much energy is required for these like models. And so if you're able to like downsize that, right, where like you don't need that much energy anymore to do the same amount of compute or even more compute, think about how much more offering there is now that AI can provide, because you could just have so much more compute for so much less energy. Like that curve all of a sudden changes quite dramatically. So I'm a really big fan of that too.
Cool. So it sounds like you're very product focused and results focused. Do you care about the process of these companies or the founder's moral character or whatever it might be?
I think it's incredibly hard to have a real moral opinion, like a strong, informed opinion about these founders. As being one myself, you get told to write a lot of things. You get told to show up in a lot of places. A lot of times you take a lot of shit from a lot of people that you don't want to be taking shit from. And sometimes you react negatively to it. It's a hard gig being a founder. I'm not saying it's impossible or that like it's an excuse for everything, but at the end of the day, I think like a founder's job is to create impact. And the best way to judge them is by the impact they create. Fuck all the words they say. What is the real impact? And so that's
How do you
where
define impact?
For me, it's about what their products deliver. That's the biggest thing. So if like a founder's job is to create impact through their companies, what's the impact of the products that those companies create? And for what it's worth, I also like a couple controversial founders. Like I'd say the most controversial founder I love is Palmer Luckey from Anduril. Like I know like half of Silicon Valley hated on him for a while. I've always been his biggest fan. I love what he's doing with Anduril. Like we need new defense primes. We need them we need them badly. Yeah. So I don't know. That's like my main thesis around like liking founders is like, what is the impact they're creating, regardless of all the other shit on top. Like they're not meant to be celebrities, in my opinion. Like I think it'd actually be great if like most founders weren't even that popular. Like let the companies be popular, let the products be popular. The founders should be in the shadows, right? The products and the company should speak for themselves. Like I've tried really, really hard with Doppler not to make it where it's like my name is strongly attached with Doppler in the sense of like Doppler couldn't be successful if it didn't have my name. Like Doppler should be able to stand on its own as a brand, as a company. It's super freaking important. And I think a lot of the best companies do too. Like Amazon, Microsoft, all those companies, like Jeff Bezos was like tied to the brand, and now not so much. Bill Gates tied to the brand, not so much for Microsoft, because they were great companies and they built great brands. And so I very much follow the same way. I don't think founders should be celebrities.
I agree. Could not agree more.
Yeah, Ben, I feel like you very much live that ethos of not being out and about? I feel like it's because people bother you a lot, like take up your time. That's my hypothesis.
I mean, to be somebody who's known for the words that come out of their mouth and not the products that they choose to use their life to build, I think that's just a sad state of society for people to sort of gravitate towards that. Like, I personally don't care who's the head of any company. Are they the captain of the ship that's driving it in a particular direction, telling the navigator where to go and making sure that the crew is kind of fed and is on station doing what they need to get done? Sure, they are the visionary. That's their job. But nothing's going to happen on that ship without the crew. And the crew is what builds the ship and maintains the ship.
100%.
So I've always felt more esteem towards the actual builders. Maybe that's because I'm one myself. I'm a nerd like that. But I get more excited when I talk to somebody who's built stuff. And founders like yourself, Brian, who are like, yeah, you built something yourself, or many, many times you're doing that, and then moved into a role of advising and vision. I respect that so much more than somebody who's like, I got out of Harvard Business School. I went into business management. I've been an executive. I run a company. I'm famous because of my name and what I do. It's like, yeah, but you haven't built anything. You've been a captain of ships, but I'm not saying I think those people are worthless. They're very, worthwhile human beings. I just don't personally feel an attachment to people like that.
I also, like, maybe controversial take, I don't think the amount of money you've generated should be something that determines your celebrity status. Like,
Correct.
I really don't. Like, I don't really care how rich you are. Like, it's what are you, and as you mentioned, Ben, it's like, it's not just about like what have you done, but it's like, what has your team done? That's like, no matter what I say as a CEO, my team's going to do a whole lot more hours of work than I'm going to do, like, cumulatively, than I'll ever be able to do. I just don't have that kind of time, right? Like, that's why teams exist. Now think about like Microsoft. Satya says, like, gives a speech about like, we're going to do everything in AI and become the next like giant of AI. Think about how many like millions of hours get deployed through all their people and teams and stuff like that. Those people are doing the real work.
Yeah, when you start thinking about large companies and large bets that they're making, as that team grows in size, that's a direct representation of the complexity of what they're trying to tackle. You look at the exact same product coming out of a startup and compare that to what does that look like in AWS, or what does that look like in Azure. If you were to look at both code bases for that implementation side by side, you would not be able to understand one of them. The startup one, you'd be like, yeah, I grok this. Some problems here. Like, okay, that's kind of hacky. But you look at the true enterprise grade cloud provider implementation, like, how many millions of lines of code is this? In how many different code bases? How many people contributed to this? That's why this took 6 months to roll out. Wow, this is complex. It's because it has to be in order to work in that ecosystem, and yet so many humans involved in building it. That's why I always like silently applaud when even one of our competitors to our company builds something cool and people like it. I'm just like, good on you. Like,
Yeah,
congratulations on doing this.
it's
It's like I'm just sort of cheering for humanity in general. Like, hey, we as a species built something cool here. I don't care if we're direct competitors with them. And I happen to work in an organization in the engineering department that a lot of people kind of see that. Like, nobody's like, oh yeah, screw them, they built this thing. Like, oh, it's more like, that was successful, let's go build that too, so our customers will be able to use that on our platform.
that is a really great point. Like, I don't think people really understand the asymmetry there of like being the first to market versus second, like on a specific like feature or even product. Because like when you're first, you have no clue if you're going to be right. You have no clue if like the thing that you're building is going to get like is going to draw market attention, and the market's going to love it or not. And the risk there is that you could be wrong, and you may be wrong a lot. It's far easier as a second player to just go, that worked, that didn't work, that worked. I'm just going to do the things that did work and bundle them up in a nice, pretty way that like is slightly different than the competitor, that has our own little spin and taste to it, or style, or flair. Like we've seen this with one of our competitors right now, where like they just went and ripped 99% of the product. And then they took a couple of other competitors we have, and they looked at their products and they said, what worked out of their thing? And they took a couple of the best parts of their products too, and they mashed it all together. So it's like the best of Doppler, the best of this, the best of that. But now we're starting to see them invent their own stuff that hasn't been built by anyone. And we're like, it's a little bit harder than it looks. Some of that stuff isn't really resonating the way you think it would. It's just a hard game. And like they will build stuff that is absolutely beautiful and like will be amazing to have, and we will learn from that. And I applaud them when they do, because they're in the game fighting just as much as we are to add value to society. Like I think that's also the other thing that like people forget a lot is like we're all doing this just to make impact. Like we only like the company only gets more valuable if we drive more impact.
Yeah, and you can't really have much, in my opinion, like understanding your product. The one feature that thing has that resonates the most with me is on your website. There's a title screen just called Firefighting 101, and that I don't know how much that's like the selling point for your customers of like this is why this is so important. But if anybody has ever had to do that exercise internally at their company manually, that is a special form of Geneva Convention's violation torture event where you're like, hey, we need to search through our code base and see if any secrets exist that have ever been leaked. And then we need to see if those are still active and then try to rotate them and ping the people. And when you look at an enterprise, like either a mono repo or if you have thousands of different repos, and you look at the amount of code that you have, you're like, okay, we have like 1.7 billion lines of code. All right. That's not what you're searching through. You're searching through every commit of every repo since the beginning of time. And think about the volume of that.
And also every Slack message, every email. And you have this thing of like, did I miss something? What's the cost of missing something? Even if you captured everything, you're racing against the clock. Like think about how fast data moves out of AWS, right? Yeah. Gigabits per second. So like every minute that you spend looking for a secret, not even just revoking, but just looking for those secrets, that is tons and tons of data leaving your system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the risk, like
is enormous.
You accidentally, like it happens fairly regularly when we're interfacing with like our customers, where we get some support ticket to engineering that's like, hey, we need help debugging this. Here's like a notebook that we're using, and it contains the exception. You just start looking through it. I'd say 40% of the time I have to immediately send a high urgency priority email back to them and whoever else was from that company, alerting them to please rotate your token immediately. Like you leaked it to me. I'm going to delete this thing that you sent to me and make sure that it's deleted off of our, like any place that we would potentially store it. And then please send me a clean notebook when you get this fixed, but please rotate your secret right now. Sometimes it's not even where you would think a secret would be leaked. And that never would have happened if that was detected when you were putting that into your development environment and preventing people from doing that. I think it's a big thing to add into a product as a feature that I don't think people always think about what the lack of that could like enable.
Yeah.
Leak a service principal key that is basically root admin access to your cloud provider. Think about what you can do with that.
Everything.
Yeah.
You can do everything with it.
Literally, yeah. Brian, are you familiar with Trufflehog?
Yeah. Big fan of them.
Yeah, I remember like a year or two, or like probably 18 months ago, I was put on a security audit project, and I had no idea what I was doing, per usual, and found this cool little library that will actually go parse plain text and like do regex matching on what tokens should look like typically. And then I remember I actually showed it to you, Ben. I don't know if you remember, but proposed it in the security channel, like, oh, we should add this to the Databricks product. And yeah, I think it's sort of there now, but I don't know what they're using on the back end or if I inspired that at all. But it's a real problem, like, because the amount of Slack messages that have plain text tokens, it's kind of funny, like in the Databricks database.
Yeah,
it's scary. You get a data breach, you should be worried about like what that looks like in the news, but what you should be really worried about is when it happens and it's been compromised and you don't hear anything. That's scary.
Yeah,
it's like, what did they get and what are they going to do with it?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to monetize this in some way.
I think people often forget like the impact it has to real people, right? A lot of times when I see the framing of like a data breach, I see it from the sense of like, ooh, a company had a data breach, bad on them, they're going to get some fine. Like, and I'm like, no, there's real people at the other end. Like, this company's in charge of storing real people's data, and real people's data just got out.
Yeah.
I have a quick story, and then maybe for you guys. I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll try to make it quick. Right when I moved to Austin, Texas, I flew my mom out to kind of get a sense of Texas, like Austin, Texas, and I was trying to sell her on it. And I take her to this barbecue spot, and right in the middle of our glorious barbecue lunch, I get a call, and it's from the Texas Borders and Customs, and they're saying, "Hey, we have an illegal package with drugs and money in it, and we're investigating you now. You are formally being investigated." And I'm like, oh shit, this is the moment where my life just changes. Like, this is where like I go from like a CEO to like behind jail bars. Like, this is the start of that. I was freaking out. And they started asking me questions to verify who I was. And a lot of these questions were like, did you live at this address at this time? Did you do these things? Have you bought these things? Like, so much stuff that I was like, only the federal government would know even to ask these questions. And at some point we get like about an hour in, we get our lawyers on the phone, and we got a team of lawyers working with them, like, because they're like really, and they're like, they say some scary shit too. They're like, if you hang up this call, that's like presumed guilt. Things like that, where you're like, oh shit, I'm on this phone and I don't have time to think now. I just got to answer this barrage of questions that are coming my way. And it was scary, like, because, every question that you get wrong is like jail time. And at some point, my lawyers caught it where we realized it was a scam. Yeah. But they got me, like, CEO of a security company. They got me, like, and I'm thinking about like, okay, how much information did they have on me to even make this feel legit? And then how much more information did they just get from me because of this call? Right now, they have more intel to make an even better thing next time around. And it's just like, you forget that like there's real people on the other side of this. I don't know if my mom would have been able to fight them like that. She doesn't have a lawyer she can call. She doesn't have like people trained in this kind of stuff. Like, I do cybersecurity training. I just did one like a week ago, and they still got me. Like, I can imagine a whole bunch of random people who like they would have given everything. Like, their bank accounts would have been drawn, their social security numbers would have been like totally used. Like, they had just enough to really convince me for like an hour and a half, right? And that's a long time.
What gave it away that they were scammers?
We asked some really hard question back that inflamed them. They got them a little frustrated, and then an accent came out of the blue that was like totally like out of, like, it was like an Indian accent. We're like, oh, gotcha. Like, this is so not. It's just,
I don't think your name is John.
Yeah. And it changed on a dime, and then like we started asking harder questions, and like the more we asked inflammatory questions, the more the accent came out. And then we were like, okay, if you're real, just come find, where I live, come find me and knock on my door and arrest me. And then they like hung up a second later.
Yeah, that's my standard. Like, I don't know whoever had my Texas phone number before I got that phone. It's funny, it's an Austin number. But that dude must have had some security breach, because I get scam calls every week usually from Indian call centers. And I'm the clown that actually messes with them, just because I can tell when it's like, oh, I don't recognize this number, but they're spoofing something. like some other number in my area code. And it's fun to just start like asking those sorts of questions to them. And then when they start, I've definitely had not the FBI one, but I've had ATF and the IRS before. I'm just like, hey, you know my home address. Just send some agents over, whatever paperwork you need. And they always just either hang up or say a bunch of like very bad words to me on the call. And it always just amuses me. The more amount of time you can waste of theirs is the better, like the best thing that you can do. So if you have free time, which you don't, but anybody else who's listening, keep them on the line and then just see what happens. Because for sure, the federal government does not make phone calls about an indictment or anything or about an investigation. They like to drive their cars up and talk to you face to face.
As they should, for what it's worth. Like, yeah. When it gets to that serious. Yeah, it was just, I think we all have some story like that. But remember that these stories feel credible because of the data breaches.
Exactly. Like, how are they going to know all of that detail about you unless some company leaked a password, leaked a token, and then some really smart sociopath was like, pay dirt. I'm going to leak this online, sell this data set on the dark web, and I'm going to make a couple $10,000 out of this. You know,
the ones that really get me, like really get like, they just bother the hell out of me. Is they like go after these like old gentlemen that like are probably unhappy in their marriages, and they boot up these like AI fake girlfriends. And these AI fake girlfriend, my one of my uncles just got hit by this, and like I'm telling him like every time I meet him, stop, do not talk to this woman any further, and like he keeps doing it. He doesn't know how to stop, and like they're like, oh, I made all my money as this like really attractive 22-year-old that's talking to this guy who's like 60 about through like Bitcoin and like crypto, and you should put all your money in this crypto wallet, and I'll teach you how to make a ton of money too. And like, oh man, he's lost so much money doing that. And like to the point where like Fidelity and these other brokerages are like, we've seen that you've done this stuff. We're shutting down your accounts because we don't trust them anymore. Like it's just like a cascading effect. And I'm like, damn, like it's like, it's not just like the scary tactics. Sometimes they go these other routes of like targeting old gentlemen that are lonely and they're taking and this is like their livelihood. Like they lose this stuff. Like they don't have money to pay rent or live. Like they're retired. There's no more money coming in. So you take that from them, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad.
Yeah. Cool. I know we're coming up on time. I want to shift gears one more time and ask one more question before we end. I can't end the episode without knowing. So we were talking about iterating in the startup context. You have an idea, you have a product, someone's like, or you've pitched it on your like friends and family, and they're like, fuck, all right, fine, I'll try it. And then they start liking it. You start getting traction. How do you think about pivoting within that space of growth? Like, what are the first principles, and does the objective function change?
And I just want to make sure I understand. When you say pivoting, do you mean moving to a different idea?
Yeah, you were the Bitcoin ML site, and now you're very different.
And maybe this is not the most first principle view. I don't think like every time that I've like pivoted a company, I think it was more out of anger than it was out of like first principle thinking. You're just so frustrated. But I think there's signals that I look for. The first is, do I feel like I have the ability to grow it? And do I have an understanding of why I do not have this ability? Is it a timing problem? Is it a market problem? Like, it's so easy to build something that looks pretty and adds value, but the market just doesn't want. Like, the market only wants a couple set of things, I've generally found, and they want it really bad, things that they do. And so I kind of like listen to the market of like, are you telling me you want this bad or not? Like, I think Segment's a great example of this. When Segment got started, they built like a really quick, like couple line SDK, and that thing blew up. It was dead simple, right? And it blew up. You don't need something super complex and flashy to get signal. People really, if this is a real problem, people want an answer to, right? Or they want solved. And I think a lot of times we kind of like get into like this product mode of like, we're going to build something nice and cool. And then we spend all the time doing that. And we don't realize the market actually, we never tested if the market wants this or not. You can always build the sexy thing later, but like test the root principle stuff first. And so I try to like, listen, is the market actually wanting this, or am I pushing, or is the market pulling me? And the only right answer is the market is pulling you. To every founder out there, pull only. If you are pushing, that is a recipe for unhappy life. In my strong opinion. And then the other one is, am I happy doing it? And I found that like after the shine wears off, if I'm not feeling this excitement and this buzz, then it's like, what are you even doing it for, man? Like, if the market doesn't want this, you're not excited about it. Why are you doing this? And just give yourself that reality check. And I've usually found right at I get that peak of like frustration, another idea comes around. I'm like, ooh, that's a shiny thing I should go investigate. And that's usually my pivot point. It's like out of that frustration, a new idea emerges. And one of them may end up being really good. And I've gone through that a couple of times where there's some good ideas that came out of that moment.
Would you say that most of the successful startups that are out there that are, financially solvent and are going places, that initial root idea came from somebody's personal experience instead of just their ideating?
Absolutely. I would say almost all my good ideas have come from experience. And I think that comes back to like actually a really pivotal thing, which is like, that's the market. You may just be one person in the market, but you're still the market, right? If you're just ideating without any grounding at all, then you are really not tapped into the market. You're just like throwing shit at the wall, but there's no way to see if it sticks, right? So you at least having an idea that you're passionate about that would solve a problem for you is like at least one person in the market. And then you got to ask the question, how many of yous are out there?
Exactly. I mean, it's something that we do fairly religiously in our product roadmap processes. We like force everybody to do user journeys and say, hey, yeah, we built this thing, or this thing exists. Now let's go use it and build something with it. And how painful is that? And that identifies maybe not stuff that is directly related to what we're doing, but you're just like, man, this one step, this sucks so bad. Like, why is this so complicated? Or why did I mess this up many, many times? And then you check out what other people did and you're like, yeah, everybody messed this up. Do we need a new product here to solve this problem? And if you look at everything that Databricks has as a product offering, is the result of that exact process of people being like, yeah, this one thing, we don't have it. Nobody has it. And it sucks so much that in order for us to fix this, we have to actually design something. But we use that same process of like build something fast and simple, get some feedback, and find out what direction this needs to take.
I also think just adding on to that, especially if you're like starting at zero, like it may be different for Databricks where you already have this foundation, this set of customers, all this stuff, like same with Doppler. But if you're starting from like ground zero, you just as much as you need to understand what the product you're building is, you need to understand how you're going to grow it. Like if you're B2C, you better have a viral loop in there somewhere. Like, and that thing better be strong. If you're B2B, you better understand, are you doing product-led growth? Are you doing a sales-led growth? What is your mechanism for growth? And how are you realistically going to go reach those customers? And how are you convincing them to do it? And like, how hard is it to convince them? What is the activation energy that it's going to take for them to sign up? Like in a way, like I think credit card companies like Brex and Ramp are actually great examples of this. They're like, hey, fill out this like 2-minute form and we're going to give you a card, and that card represents money, and we're just going to give you money, and then you'll just pay us back like 30 days later, right? You'll pay us back, please. And that's like their model. And it's like, well, okay, that's pretty low friction. I fill out a form, I get a shit ton of money in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then they'll connect with my bank account to know that I can pay it back, right? That's pretty low friction versus like other tools. You may have to spend 20 minutes configuring it, another hour implementing it, another hour like convincing a whole bunch of people, and all of a sudden you're like days later and you're still not getting any value out of this tool. Right. So like, what is the activation energy it takes to get someone to use this and get value out of it? And so that's why I'd argue like those credit card companies have grown so fast, is because the activation energy is pretty much close to zero as possible. Fill out a form and get cash. Versus like a dev tool, it's like, well, now you got to think, should I trust this tool? Is it secure? Especially with Doppler, like a secrets manager. Okay, how is this going to integrate in my infrastructure? Am I going to be able to convince my developers to use this? There's an enormous amount of activation energy that it can take. I think Stripe's actually a good counterexample on a dev tool side. Does not matter convincing all your friends and developers or teammates to use this. All you need to do is add an SDK, and you can do payment processing. You need to do payment processing if you want to be a real functional company that process payments on the internet, right? So it's dead simple. It's like, am I using Braintree or Stripe? It doesn't really matter which one. I need an API that processes a credit card, right? So think about that activation energy, and it has to be comparable to the value that you drive, right? People will go through a lot of activation energy if you drive an immense amount of value. But most of the time, what you really want is that activation energy to be near zero.
Yeah, anecdotally, I still remember at a previous company I worked at where it was the shortest sales motion that I've ever seen a vendor do at any place that I've worked, where I think the meeting was 20 minutes long, which was shocking. And the contract was signed the next day. And I've never seen more engineers happy at the end of that week. They're like, we get to delete our entire payment processing system.
Yep.
And like we're just going to pay somebody to do this for us. And it's easy. And the migration was done in like less than a month. And I was like, this is crazy. Like no other vendor has ever had the success because the product is so compelling of like, hey, we can do this safely and securely, and we're taking the risk here, and we'll just make sure that you get paid. I was like, man, what a great business model.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think we're roughly at time. Any other closing thoughts before I summarize?
I would just say to anyone listening, if you're trying to build a company, think about the things we just talked about. If you're a developer, add secrets management early. Don't tack it on way later. You're going to be very grateful that you added security from the get-go, because you don't want to be learning how to firefight when you're firefighting.
Heard. Cool. So lots of cool stuff discussed today. We talked about entrepreneurship, the importance of security, some things that stood out to me. First, to get a developer adoption, ensure you're not blocking their productivity. As someone who codes a lot myself, I freaking hate it when stuff doesn't work, and it's like your job is to debug, and so adding another thing to debug is pretty not fun. In terms of giving customers value, look for the common thread of value, and also be request driven in your development. Regarding pivoting, think about three things primarily. First, do I have the ability to grow it? Second, does the market want it bad? And the market must pull you. You shouldn't be pushing the market. And third, am I happy doing the thing? And then finally, founders should not be celebrities. So Brian, if people want to learn more about you or your work, where should they go?
Doppler.com. And then for me personally, you can follow me. I'm not that big on social media, but I still have one, Vallelunga Brian, both on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much. Until next time, it's been Michael Burke and my co-host,
Ben Wilson.
and have a good day, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.